Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trick 4. This time, Bloodlines. Yes, TNG Bloodlines. It's always about the Bloodlines on there. Become part of our bloodline. You don't have to do a blood oath. You don't have to be related. Become a Patreon member. Support us. A few bucks a month. It's nothing. It's practically nothing. But you get a lot for nothing. You get the video of this show, our bonus episodes that we do in between, which are we've got some coming up. You're gonna wanna listen to and or see, and you get some mothership stuff from It's All Been Done Radio Hour. Patreon.com/IBD. And this is Bloodlines on It's All Been Trek Before.
To another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome, coming to you from AI. I'm just kidding. We were talking about off the air that the last several months of podcasts you've been listening to have been AI edited and only me reviewed, which is really exciting. If you didn't know, this podcast is now edited by AI and me, but AI first. Saves me a lot of time. Want to get out there, tell that publicly. I want to plug resound.fm. They're not paying us, but I want to plug them because they have been such a lifesaver. Thank you, resound.fm, for making editing this podcast half the time it used to take me.
But none of the hosts are AI yet, so.
Not yet. We're adding a fourth host, female, of course. That will be AI.
We will have to name her something other than Alexa.
Let's talk about Star Trek: The Next Generation Bloodlines. What are your first impressions?
I think it was a nice workaround for showing Picard as a father, although it's hard to say if that would ring true, really. In other words, he was able to we were able to see him in a relationship like that, where he didn't have to commit, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's easy to say, well, this is what I would have done if, you know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Star Trek seems really concerned with Picard as a father. I feel like we spent 6.5 seasons avoiding it. But after this, we've got 4 films and 3 seasons of Star Trek Picard. And I will tell you, dealing with Picard as a father is a theme in at least one film and part of Star Trek Picard. I mean, I'm not going to get into details of it, but I feel like once they teased the premise, they would not drop it after this.
Mm-hmm. So
I will say my first impression, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of Steven, but it wasn't great. It was very disappointing. I think they do it better later, the Picard as a father thing. But honestly, with only 3 episodes left after this, I was super disappointed this was the 4th from the end because it felt so mediocre and belonging at best stuck in the middle of some mediocre part to forget about it instead of so close to the end.
Yeah, I felt like throughout early on, I wrote, my note was, because initially it was, you are the father. And then about halfway through my note is not the father. And sure enough, he isn't. And, you know, I was just, it was kind of my thing. I'm always like, all right, what's really going on here? Can we get to it? And it was, it was okay, whatever the scam ended up being, but the Ferengi getting revenge or whatever. But yeah, again, it led to a couple nice moments of Picard being a father figure kind of a thing. I didn't love the actor, and I know he's been in a lot of things that played the son either, but and we'll get into this deeper later, but father-son reconciliation kind of stuff talk. Well, I'll save that for later. But yeah, I wish there was a little more meat on the bone. I'm with you, Jimmy, for this late in the game. And maybe that's the way they felt, was like, well, we want to get this in, but we really don't want to cram it in at the end. But, you know, and it all reeks of, I say reeks in a good way, smells in it. It's very reminiscent of Carol and David Marcus and Wrath of Khan.
Yep.
Yes.
So
I thought the same thing.
We've kind of done that. We even have the shot at the end, and you know where Picard's, you know, kind of the life I could have had. And I think we've had a couple moments with him with that, not necessarily with children, but women who've come through his life and all that kind of stuff. So, which it doesn't take away. And of course, Patrick Stewart delivers it great. And they do have the one nice bonding moment. But up until then, it's just like, I don't care about this jerk, and I don't want to care about this jerk. and we don't get enough interesting, you know, it especially, and I'm going on too far for our first impression, but especially when essentially it's like, yeah, I knew your mother. We just didn't work out. We weren't together for that long. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
So
The one redeeming thing I will give him credit for was this actually ties into an earlier season episode. I mean, it was a first season episode, The Battle, where we've met Damon Bach before, and he tried to kill Picard.
Oh.
But, I mean, they referenced that happened 6 years ago, and that is true. And I appreciate that was a first season episode they tied back in the end. However, they recast Damon Bach. Okay. Oddly, because Frank Corsentino, who played him the first time, will still return to Voyager after this. He wasn't dead. He wasn't incapacitated. I don't know if he just wasn't available. They didn't get him. Lee Ehrenberg is who they use this time around. We've already talked about him because he's been in Star Trek as a Ferengi before as well. So that was a little odd to me that they chose to recast him. And then there was a video game that came out like a year or two after this where Damon Bach was in it, and they used Frank Corsentino's version of Damon Bach.
Interesting.
I don't know. So it's confusing that they did that, even though it felt like, okay, well, I get you want to tie something back to the first season. But the series finale is going to tie back to the first season way better than this. That's all I'll say about that at the moment. We're caught back up with Bach at the beginning that, how did he regain his rank? Because if you remember the episode, and I only vaguely did, but they did a good job filling you in. Like, he was caught trying to kill Picard and putting his vengeance ahead of his profit, and so he lost his rank. And I feel like they told us that in this episode enough to remember or get the gist of that. His son actually died at the battle where Picard did the Picard maneuver, the Stargazer. That was a previous episode thing. So Picard knows the name and everything, but then we get this whole thing where they're like, you've got a son, his name is Jason Vigo, and you've been trying to hide him, and I'm going to kill him to get revenge. And it's like, okay. And Picard doesn't totally react, but he gets the last name. He's like, yeah, I know a woman with that last name.
Right.
He's not Kirk, where he's got so many dozens of women he doesn't remember all their last names. He knows the last name. He's like, yeah, that was one of the very few women I've hooked up with.
Or at least got the last name. Yeah, that cold open dumped. I mean, that was a quick dump of information. Just like, here it is, and I always enjoy that. Here's a question while we're talking about the Vigos. He's like, go, Data. I think he asked Data, go search for any Vigos or whatever. And I'm like, how does Data know? Is he just looking for any spelling? V-Y-G-O, V-I-G-O, V-E-E-G-O.
Well, he did say a place to start would be this woman's name who was at this one place 24 years ago.
Okay.
So he gave him a starting point that would have given him a last name. But yeah, I could see where he could end up looking up like Ghostbuster villains, or Viggo Mortensen was in Lord of the Rings, even though that was his first name and not his last name. But who knows how good the historical records were kept after we went through World War III. I don't know.
You beat me to it.
So Vigo, as you mentioned, Jason Vigo, was played by Ken Oland, I don't know. Best known for Leprechaun, April Fool's Day, Summer School, and this episode of Star Trek, his only episode of Star Trek. He's got 60 credits, which isn't terrible, but it looks like it's mostly one-off guest spots.
Yeah.
This is his only Trek credit. I mean, not to get ahead of ourselves, but we know he doesn't end up being the son, so of course there'd be no reason to bring him back in the films or Star Trek Picard. Even though the end kind of like, Picard might check in on him again. You gotta have a really compelling story to bring that character back, and they never came up with one.
And that was gonna be the next episode of Picard is he goes back to the planet and it's a wasteland, and now he wants revenge.
It's Wrath of Khan, Wrath of Vigo.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
J.J. Abrams is developing that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they couldn't have gone back, but I will say right now they did not go back in the films or Star Trek Picard I don't think Jason Vigo's ever mentioned again, let alone visited again. But that doesn't mean Picard didn't check back in on him as he promised to.
He's just the son of a woman that Picard had a brief relationship with
25 years ago.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, I don't know that I have a relationship with the son of any woman that I was involved with more than 25 years ago.
But his mom's dead, and he knows who his father is. So I felt like they formed a little bond in this episode where he could have been his father. He never had a father, and they took a moment to meet each other somewhere. And I think Picard rightfully got the impression this man had nobody else in his life. So I think the part of I'll check in on you was as much about that as anything. If this guy was a well-adjusted person who had a family of his own, who had his own stuff going on. I don't think Picard would have made the same promise, right?
Well, I guess the fact that he was the criminal, but he probably, he saw good in him, kind of a thing.
Criminal with a heart of gold.
Yeah. And I think I wrote this, and my notes are poorly written, but I think it's in his dress and in his demeanor. There's a bit of roguishness, to this guy. It is action. Roguish clothes. He seems like an adventurer. He's one step ahead of the law, or maybe not always, because he's done time, right? Isn't that what we hear?
This is not the alternate episode I wrote down, but now I kind of want it to be the outrageous O'Connor came back for a repeat performance, and he's the son that Picard isn't.
It felt very much like that. My alternate episode is just essentially what I alluded to earlier, which is just 24th century Maury. It's Crusher. You are the father.
Father.
Unless
that is exactly what I wrote in the scene where she said he was the father. Yeah. I'll save my real alternate episode for later because it won't make. But anyway, I really like the.
I disagree. I just want to say that I disagree about the roguishness because we didn't hear anyone else in the cast say the word rogue.
You're right. So. That's right. It is not activated until somebody says it. You're right. That's
right. No, I liked the detail that they called the Ferengi government for information, and they're like, nope, they're debating amendment to the rules of acquisition, so they're not going to reply to anybody for a long time. Like the idea of them locked in a room until they agree or disagree on this amendment was pretty great.
When they show him a picture of Kevin, I really wanted it to be Patrick Stewart in a wig.
Or a mustache.
Yeah.
Wasn't that picture like the guy who played the kid that played his nephew or something in the earlier episode? I can't remember.
Might have been.
I try to look it up while we're talking, but I'm pretty sure that picture was like an actor we'd seen before. I could definitely, absolutely be wrong on this, though.
It felt like something they would have done, but at the same time, if they knew that he wasn't going to be the son, maybe they wouldn't have wanted to do that.
I'm going to ask this, and I know this will go against your code, possibly, Keith, but you guys can do spoilers for me, and I'll just forget. But do any of the Star Trek captains ever have daughters?
Sulu.
What's that? Oh, Sulu, yeah.
You'll meet her very soon.
Who doesn't? Well, I should say Kirk doesn't. Yeah, Kirk just has David, right? He doesn't have any kids later, right?
Not that we know of.
Yeah. Spock has a son, right?
Does he?
I don't know. I thought Spock did have children.
I don't think so in canon.
Okay, but
Yeah, I know. Like, there's in novels, Saavik gave birth to his child, but I don't think we ever followed up on the child anywhere that I can recall. Yeah, Sulu's daughter will be in the next film we're about to see, so we're gonna get Sulu's daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's in a bunch of the novels as well. And
well, of course, now that it's woke, every captain's gonna have a daughter.
Yeah.
Well, especially the gays. Of course, Sulu adopted an Asian daughter, even though he's Asian himself. But you know what I mean? Modern family trope there. The gays are going to adopt an Asian daughter. Yeah. I will say the Kelvin verse does not negate Sulu's daughter in the original verse. You'll see when we get to it. Yeah. We'll just pin in that for now. I was looking at Memory Alpha. I see nothing about the photo being somebody. And they did mention David Marcus, though, on Memory Alpha, which makes total sense because, of course, we were all thinking the same thing. So I did really appreciate the scene where Picard confides the whole story to Riker. Like, that's a good testament to what their relationship has been building over the 7 years. Because I can't see first season Picard making that confiding scene in him. Maybe season 2, but not nearly as openly. I think it was a real testament to where Will and Jean-Luc are at this point in the series. And it's only going to grow better from here. I love the two of them. They're not quite Kirk and Spock level, but they're really good dynamic duo when they want to be.
Yeah, that was another good scene. And I was trying to do the math, but in my mind, he was talking about when he's at the academy, but he says he was on shore leave. So very romantic, very intense, and it was a 2-week relationship.
And then we need to play Ruth's theme behind it, but they didn't.
Yeah.
We finished the original series like 5-6 years ago in real life, and I'm still calling back to it. We will at the end of this show, I'm sure.
Fantastic. There's a Star Trek podcast. All I want to do is talk about Star Trek, and he spent an entire episode essentially on that theme, more or less. How great that music is. Right after the Picard Riker conversation, he has Data do the scan of the planet, trying to track down the boy. And
the boy
is the most specific.
He's not the boy. Wesley's the boy.
That's right. It's the most specific pinpoint censoring we've ever had. If we'd had this in other episodes, we wouldn't have had episodes. It would have just been and we're out. It was just
Data loves scanning for life forms. He really does.
Yeah, well, I'm checking 8 humans. It knows 3 are female. They're too young to be Miranda Vigo. What about males? Well, there's an infant male and an elderly male. 2 are middle-aged. That's precise. That is precise. And Picard's like, that's 7. You said there were 8.
You're immediately making me flash to a scene in the first Next Gen film with Data scanning for life forms. So again, pinning it.
Yeah, okay,
Data loves scanning for life forms. That's all.
And then they finally find not the boy. The individual appears to be approximately 2 kilometers beneath the planet's surface, and they can tell he's between 20 and 30 years old. This is some amazing censoring.
I honestly think 20 to 30 is a big lifespan. I think they should be able to narrow it a little bit better. Picard breaking to Jason that he might be his father he did it as gently as you could given the circumstances. He tried to dance around it when Jason asks about it. He's like, well, I might be your dad. I don't know. Maybe. It was Patrick Stewart did a really good job in this episode. I will keep criticizing this episode for the rest of this hour, but I want to stop for a second and say Patrick Stewart delivered a wonderful performance.
And maybe this is where we get into what I kind of alluded to in my first impressions, which is, hey, I guess we've kind of skirted around it already, but and I know, Jimmy, you don't have this problem because you're a young man with 2 children, but well, you might. I don't know. I shouldn't speak for you, but I don't know. How would you, and actually you can speak to this because it's talk to there. How would you engage with a child that was yours that you had no idea about? Like, what's the starting point? And he tries like the mom, and if the kid's just like, not only, and he's not even mad at him. He's just like, I just don't care. Like, I don't want to have a relationship. And I get where Jason Vico's coming from too. Like, hey, dude, you're just some dude to me. I need to get back to what I was doing. I need to find the lost ark or whatever he was up to down there. So, but yeah, I don't know.
I've had that dream, but based on my previous life, I don't think it's coming true. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess it reminds me of somebody asking me, how do you talk to these actresses, for lack of a better term? How do you engage with them? I'm like, you talk to them like the normal people, like you talk to anybody else. So I guess that's what Picard's trying to do. But I guess what I'm actually saying is there a best way? And I don't know that there is. It's just, sometimes I guess it's just like with anyone else. I mean, he's literally meeting a stranger and trying to make conversation. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
When we met Jason with his personality and everything, I immediately was like, is this Picard's son or is this Kirk's son? But then I remembered David Marcus was real nerdy, kind of like Picard. But then I remembered the meme about how Kirk was a really nerdy kid who grew into the being roguish. So David Marcus is following that trajectory. Picard was a really rebellious youth that grew into being a nerd. So I guess the sons actually match if you look at them at younger points in their life with roads untaken and without events that push them into different directions, right?
I'd like to think, well, I know I started nerdy because I was called a nerd, but I don't know that I developed into roguish because no one's ever referred to me as roguish. So.
I've just developed from nerd to embracing my nerd.
That's for sure. I developed from nerd into a-hole. No, is that a relative of roguish? I don't know.
Speaking of rogue, at this point we found out that Bach has gone rogue, and he's not actually a daemon. Different type of rogue
in the history of It's All Been Tracked Before.
It's a different type of rogue, but it was a good transition.
No, that was great.
And it actually said, I know you Patreon might be able to make it out. I already crossed out. Bach is rogue, so it was natural. It was not. The scene where Jason hits on Troy was unnecessary and awful.
I knew it was coming.
bit.
I had no doubt it was coming. I could see it in both their eyes. It was going to happen.
Yeah, but she didn't want it to happen. There was no consent on her part.
No,
And I don't blame her.
that's why I thought he might be roguish.
That's where I was thinking he was Kirk's son instead of Picard's. But then what we just talked about.
I guess if he was roguish, she might have mentioned it and or been swayed by his moves. But yeah.
This point in the episode, we got the Bach in Picard's quarters that then disappears. I thought the thing was the thing that was projecting a holographic beam. I assume this was all a hologram. They'd infiltrated the Enterprise again, which is what happened sort of in the season 1 episode. There was a hologram that they could invade Picard's dreams or whatever and make him think things were right. And so it felt like they kind of bent over backwards to make those connections. But then when the whole truth was out, it was like, really? He found the way to beam through his shields? I don't buy that. So it really doesn't work for me.
There was a lot of work done to make these two come together and then not be together.
I'm going to blame the writer of this episode, Nick Sagan, who I read on Memory Alpha was like estranged from his father. And so that's where he got the concept for the episode.
What's his father?
Nick Sagan has 7 writing credits. 2 on Next Gen. Before this, he wrote the episode Attached earlier this season, which just came out on the podcast as we're talking about this, where Picard and Crusher get the mental connection thing between each other. He also ends up being a story editor for Voyager for a season, and during that season, he writes a couple of episodes. Season 5, he's a story editor on Voyager.
No,
so that's a few years down the road.
Episodes, but he writes great 2-person scenes. I'll give him that. So
are some really moving scenes in this.
Because in Attached, there are also some great scenes. So
I mean, if you look at his 7 credits, besides Next Gen and Voyager, the other 5 credits, one of them is for Captain Simeon and the Space Monkeys. Another one is for Space Precinct. Another one is for Zork Nemesis. He's got a genre for sure. Directed by Les Landau, one of our regulars. Of course. So Picard, because of the hologram invasion, assigns a security squad, and I didn't bother to look up the male security officer, but I immediately recognized Lieutenant Rhodes, who was played by Amy Pitts. Pitts. Best known for Rudy, Caroline in the City, Jingle All the Way, and this one episode of Star Trek, which I call Bull on because she has been so much that this one episode of Star Trek should not be in the top 4.
I was immediately, not surprisingly, taken with her, and then when I was doing the same research, Jimmy, she's got a great...
Did you recognize her immediately, or did you have to research?
I did not.
Oh, really?
But now it's like, of course. She had a great run on The Office. She was the bartender that dated Michael briefly. Yeah, she's done well. And a lot of different things. So
I know she didn't do Seinfeld, but she did some great 90s movies. Like we mentioned Jingle All the Way and Rudy already. I guess Rudy's 90s movie.
Yeah.
She's got guest spots on Ally McBeal Show, Drew Carey, ER, a lot of those. And I remember she played the mom in a Canadian show that aired on the CW called Aliens in America. I really loved that. Yeah, Burn Notice, Ghost Whisperer, as you mentioned, The Office, Bones, so many things. Medium, Nip Tuck, Curb Your Enthusiasm. I immediately recognized her. It was like, I love Amy Pitts or Pietz or whatever. However you say it.
Marin, which I remember that one. Yeah. She's still going.
In that scene with her, though, we get Jason's handshaking.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It was an unnecessary layer to the subplot. I guess it hints at what the reveal is, but I don't know. I didn't love it. Really? They're going to do something with his physicality?
That's when I first was like, okay, he's trying to fight shape-shifting or something,
Well, I haven't seen this episode, so from the moment Beverly said, "You're the father," I haven't seen this episode, but I know my future Star Trek history. And I was like, Picard didn't have a son. I know that this isn't his son. I don't know what the twist is. But immediately I'm like, what's the additional twist? Because I know this isn't legit, even though Beverly says this.
Yeah, that's when it really started. And not that I would... I obviously I had that feeling for the whole episode, but still.
So then he has a seizure. Amy Pitts, whatever. Rhodes calls the medical emergency. And that goes into the scene where Picard climbs the rocks and talks to him about his son, or about his mom. Sorry. Picard's son.
Yeah.
Rhodes' mom. Of course he's got a dead mom. Of course he does. But Picard does open up about his dad in that scene, which I liked. We also get the really stereotypical line where Jason tells him, "You don't understand. You don't understand, Dad. You don't understand." Which I'm like, he's a little old to throw that line. I did really like Picard's joke at the end of that scene about, well, you'll never look at your hairline the same way again.
That I did. That made me laugh.
But bad joke, not a great joke, because Picard understands science and everything, and men typically get the hair gene from their mom. So just saying, it wasn't a very good joke.
I heard that's changing, some of the science behind that, but I can't tell you specifically, but I heard it is actually, that.
I mean, I've got 3 brothers, and I think 2 of us got a hairline from our mom's side, and 2 of us got it from the dad. I'm the mom's thing. My mom's dad died with a full head of hair, and I think I got that gene. But I have 2 brothers that have bald patches from my dad. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky. Neither side of my family loses their hair. Well, has lost their hair.
So you'll just turn into Gandalf as you age.
Pretty much. That's what it's looking like.
Wasn't that really, really, really annoying, awful scene? And I cannot stress enough how much I hate the scene where Beverly talks to Picard and she's like, "There's something you need to know." Cut away.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay. And then it was like, oh, now we know we're right that he's not the father.
I know. It was so annoying.
Yeah. And I can't remember which, I think it's when he comes in after the seizure or when they get the emergency, because there's a woman randomly just laying there in full clothes.
I missed this.
They're not scanning her or anything. She's just laying in sick bay when they get the notice. They're like, oh, we got to scramble. It's real. I know I can't find I should have taken a picture of it because I almost did when I was watching. Like, that's really weird. She's just laying on the sick bay. And, none of that other stuff has to be going on, but it was just like, you guys could have tried a little bit like they were trying to treat her or something, but it just looked like she was resting. So it was just very...
There's a transporter fight, which I wish we got a little more tension and drama of, oh, our signals, our beam's doing this, our beam's doing that. Spock wins. Okay, fine. And he calls Picard to say, "I'm going to kill your son. I'm going to show you the body." But he doesn't keep the call open to show him kill the son. I feel like if you're trying to maximize your torture of Picard, you're going to leave the channel open so he can see you kill his son.
Or at least hear it or something.
Yeah. I don't know. That bothered me. That would not be advisable. Oh, the Picard says something to Data about beaming, and Data's like, "Well, that would not be advisable." And Picard's like, "I'll take that as a yes." And I'm like, there's this crack coming out.
Bones.
I can see that being a Kirk and Spock exchange where Spock says it's not advisable, and Kirk's like, "Yep, we're doing it."
Bones is rolling in his grave if he's dead by now. And this time, well, there's like, took my chances with this crazy transporter business that's not working, might be working, might not be working right. Yeah, crazy.
Well, we saw him 6 years ago in the timeline, if you remember, in the pilot.
Yeah.
And I would bet good money he's dead by now. Scotty's only alive because he was in that transporter beam for 75 years.
That's right. Yeah.
And we know Chekhov's still alive. I don't think we ever got a status update on Sulu and Uhura. We know Spock's still alive and Chekhov's still alive based on the canon. Kirk, we'll get to that real soon in the canon, so I don't want to talk about it. But yeah, Uhura and Sulu, we never got an update on if they're still alive at this time period or not. I like to think they are somewhere. Picard beams over and he tells in front of Jason, he has not told Jason that you're not my son, which was a very dramatic moment. Yeah. We get this whole thing where Bach tried to resequence his DNA without telling him, and Jason somehow never noticed, even though it caused him a neurological disorder, which I'm like, did he have a blackout night where he was like drugged in a bar and doesn't remember what happened? What I think makes more sense, and this is my alternate episode, was that Bach would have paid Jason to be in on the con from the beginning, rather than do a secret DNA resequencing.
Now you got me. The
episode would have played very differently, but having a con man pretending to be his son would have made more sense and been a simpler story.
Yeah. You barely have to change the dialogue. I mean, the dialogue of the father quote unquote son conversation.
Well, you just have Jason actually soften quicker and more fully.
Yes.
Because you still let him resist because you want to reel in the con, right?
Make it real, yeah.
But then you have him like actually say, "Dad, save me!" while he's on box ship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that seems like a more clever story than what we got.
You left out the best part too. You know, the reveal at the end where Picard realizes what happens and he just looks at the screen and goes, "Con!"
Where the whole reveal to his crew that there never was a ransom and that he lied about being reinstated as a daemon, I thought was, again, unnecessary. It was a couple of lines. Then they paid a couple of extras to wear Ferengi makeup just to make it make sense that he had a ship. And yet at the same time, it was like, dude, you're just bending over backwards too far to make this plot work. And if you have to bend this far to make the plot work, it's not working.
I think this shows how far we are into DS9. That my immediate thought when that was revealed to the crew was, this probably doesn't work well in the rules of acquisition. That's all I could think. It was like, and the action they took followed the rules of acquisition.
Well, they immediately mutinied. Yeah.
So that's immediately where my thoughts turned to.
My last notes are on the scene where Picard offers to let Jason stay on the Enterprise, says he'll come back, and then sneaks a present into his bag, which is the relic that Jason wasn't interested in earlier, but Picard somehow knew that he was still interested in. That was all, again, Patrick Stewart sold the hell out of this episode. I lay 0% of the blame for this disaster on him. Yeah. It was a touching, moving scene in spite of how bad the episode was leading up to it. The episode didn't deserve this closer.
And he and Shatner are different kinds of actors, obviously, but you know, I was going to say Patrick Stewart never had to act in Spock's brain, but some of these episodes have not been great.
He's had his equivalent of Spock's brain.
Yeah, his full commitment is just a different way than Shatner did it there. And it's a different time, of course, too. But yeah, I mean, we say this in comedy, but in this instance, yeah, he played it straight. He committed to the material. And yeah, if he doesn't, or a lesser actor, and I'm not going to name names, or we don't need to come up with somebody. You folks will do it in the Reddit. Or wait, Jimmy has some ideas.
No, I was just saying me. If it was me,
then
it wouldn't have worked.
Then God, what a dull episode. But yeah, he sells it, and like I said, our guy, Mr. Sagan, I think he does write some good two-person interpersonal. Not emoting, but he writes good scenes. I think that's especially when it's two people. I keep falling on emoting, but having a heart-to-heart, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
I will say I just Googled Nick Sagan because when you said it occurred to me. He is Carl Sagan's son.
Yes.
And he's known for writing science fiction novels primarily. That explains how I got the job on Star Trek and script editor off of these two scripts that didn't work. He's Carl Sagan's son. Yeah. Nepotism at Wild.
He's a Nepo baby.
He is. Absolutely. A lot of his Voyager credits, they made him team up with Brian Fuller. Love Brian Fuller. We'll get to talk about him because he's a showrunner and creator in his own right. But he was a writer on Voyager for a long time. So
my only other note was I wish, and this is fitting as we get down to the end of TNG, that the episode, I mean, Bloodlines is definitely on the nose and it does tell us, but it's still generic in some way. Just call it daddy issues. And that's or not the daddy issues, as the case may be. But that might have tipped their hand if they'd called it not daddy issues.
Fashion notes. I mean, Jason didn't have anything interesting. His rock climbing outfit, I guess, was a little bit novel, but I feel like we saw something similar already on Star Trek.
Yeah, I felt like it was from another episode. Yeah, for sure.
So that is literally all I got for notes. I have so few notes for this one, as you may have seen in a previous video. If you're a Patreon donor.
Or maybe us.
Are we ready for the rankings, or do you have more?
I'm done. Keith, you got anything?
Yeah.
What's your annoyance in Bloodlines?
Why? No, it's just that Jason immediately, like, when it's the whole, you know, it's what you would expect a character of that sort to do, but it's that whole you don't understand, I don't care, that kind of thing,
Are we unanimous on Jason?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Even though he's not a child, let's rank him on a scale of 1 to 10 because he was Picard's kid. I'm giving him an 8.
Wow.
I think he's a solid 8. He is really annoying, but he could have been slightly worse. I'm doing this in the moment. I did not write anything down before.
I think you brought me up to like a 5. I wasn't sure. I mean, it just, as I said, it's reasonable, but at the same time, it's just we've seen it happen too many times already. That kind of.
Steven?
I was gonna go 6.5, so I'm gonna go 7. Yeah.
Well, I already typed in 6.5 into my calculator.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
No, it's fine. I added in that 0.5 to get up to 7, so he is at a 6.666.
That is perfect.
Basically 6 2/3. That works. Yeah, I mean he's not the devil, but he sucked. Who are we having a drink with in Bloodlines?
As we get down to the end of TNG, or maybe it's just, but you know what? It's just me. It's Lieutenant Rhodes. Yeah, I immediately was taking there. And then when I did the research, or quote unquote research, it's like, oh, of course, yes.
I love the actress. I wavered on choosing Beverly because the fallout, like, hey, Picard's got a son. Let's have a drink and dish. But Patrick Stewart was so damn good in this episode. I want to have a drink with Picard and talk about what he went through. I don't think I have not chosen Picard in this final season yet, so it felt like it was the time to choose Picard.
I'm choosing Troy.
Oh, because she was so creepily hit on.
Yeah, that'll just the frustratingness of that exchange. You could tell that she wanted to talk about that.
Yeah,
probably did as soon as she left.
So ranking the episode, let's start with the Nick Sagan's previous episode, Attached. Better or worse than Attached?
Attached.
Picard and Crusher had the mind connection through the technology to read each other's thoughts.
I'm going to go below.
I don't remember that at all.
I'm going to go below as well.
It was Crusher and Picard, and
It was episode 8. We're only on episode 22.
Only.
I mean, it was a third of the way through the season, essentially.
Imprisonment.
But it has been a long season because we've combined it with DS9.
Imprisonment while on a diplomatic mission forces Picard and Dr. Crusher to deal with their deep feelings for each other. And they had the thing where they could read each other's thoughts. Something had happened to them.
And she found out he'd been crushing on her, and yeah.
Gone. Just
okay.
But yeah, it's probably less.
Let's keep ranking, and we'll see if Keith agree. Below that is Force of Nature, which was the episode right after the Attached.
Oh, that was the warp drive is a bad thing. The environment.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. That was a bad episode too.
Did it have the moments?
It's hard to know right now.
Yeah.
It's got to be recency bias that I'm going to say above.
Right.
Because I can't think of any
I don't know I don't remember what the B storyline was.
And that's the thing. Like this episode, despite how bad it was, had a couple of moments that, yeah.
Just for fun, what was the next episode below that?
Journey's End, Wesley's finale.
Ooh.
This was better than that. That was a terrible episode. This was terrible too. But I think this was slightly better. That episode was terrible and offensive.
Guys, I know we're on the lower half of this season. I'm like, what is like season 3 of TNG?
There's 2 more episodes below Journey's End. Wow. I don't think this is Sub Rosa levels, to be clear.
No, you're right. Oh my God. That was wow. But you know what? Lower Decks was this season. Is that our number 1?
That is our number 1.
Okay. That was great.
But the finale may give it a run for its money. I don't know. Yeah. I have not seen these last 2 episodes before the finale, but based on my understanding of what one of them is about, I think one of them might be really good too. So I think of the 3 episodes we have left, we have at least 2 really good ones.
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure the finale is one of the best episodes of the series, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Even though I've never seen it, I've read the novelization like 7 times. It's really damn good. I mean, I'm so pumped for it. We're going to watch that one together, live and in person. Because I'm so pumped.
As I look at all these episodes for this season, my theory, I'm optimistic that I'm sure the season finale is really good, but my concern is that they were just sat through all these episodes and then we're like, oh, thank God. Like I'm looking at Mass and Genesis, which I'm guessing we didn't like these, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we did.
I'm going to, as usual, avoid looking ahead to see what those things are. But
I try not to.
But no. I'm just saying because there's one episode I remember really liking that used to come on a lot, and I still haven't seen it, and so I'm like, it's got to be one of these last three. I keep forgetting it's coming up, and it could really be. I don't know. It could be the finale. I don't. Probably
Is it the
not.
Roe episode?
Don't ask. I don't.
Right. That's the one I really want to see. The finale, because I've read the novelization so many times. I feel like I know how the finale is going to go, even though I've never seen it, and I'm really excited for it. But of the other two leading up to the finale, the Roe one is the one I'm really excited about. She's only in one more episode, but I've heard so much about the Roe episode over the years. Maybe it won't live up, but I'm excited to see the Roe episode.
Right. It's not that one.
Okay.
Right.
It's the other one? Well, that's
Maybe.
Great.
Maybe.
If you think the other one that's not the Roe or the finale is great, then we may be in for 3 really good episodes. And I will say, while the cast did not get any time off after the series, they went straight into filming the first film because the series aired their series finale in June and the film came out in December of 94. I don't think the cast felt burnt out in the first film. And I know the first film has its detractors, but I like the first film quite a bit. So anyway, I think we got a rank for this episode. Anything else you want to say before we close it? Okay, next week. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, The Maquis, Part 2. Sisko tries to resolve the Maquis crisis by preventing a war, freeing Gul Dukat, and offering the defected Hudson the chance to return. Until then, live long.
But you're not my dad. And prosper.
Artificially, of course.
Well done. Now that's a callback.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?